Everybody else waiting to come in.
It's okay.
So
Start feeling, honey.
let's go ahead and get started. Again, I'm going to ask if you're not talking, please go ahead and mute your audio and then unmute it when you do want to talk. And so at this point, let me go ahead and introduce you to Kristin Atwell, who is the producer of the video that most of you have watched, hopefully, the making of the Riders of the Purple Sage Opera. And then Craig Bohmler, who's the composer of the Riders of the Purple Sage Opera.
So Robert can watch this.
And we'll let them go here. All right, you guys are on.
Well, thank you all for coming together today and for taking time to watch the film.
Getting the purple off her glasses. Where's that?
The film would not have been possible without the support of Zane Grey's West Society. As you saw, the composer Craig Bohmler and librettist Stephen Mark Cohen were very concerned with getting the essence of Zane Grey's novel to the stage. And as a historian and a documentary filmmaker, it was very, very important to me that we did justice to Zane Grey and his artistic process. And I have to thank Terry Bollinger and Ed Meyer and for first welcoming us to Zane Grey West Society. We came up to Mormon Lake Lodge in 2015 and filmed with Dr. Joe Wheeler and Roseanne and James DeArc and Kevin Blake and Harvey Lee. And since then, you've just been so welcoming in your community that I know that the heart and the essence of Zane Grey was present in this film because of all of your support. So with that, we'll start with a little bit about the origins of this project. Craig and I have been friends for years, and we went out to dinner for my birthday in 2012, and he started telling me about a project he was working on to translate Zane Grey's novel to the operatic stage. And he started telling me the story of Jane Witherstein out on the Arizona-Utah border and on her ranch, and without any precognition, my vision just filled with Ed Mell's artwork. And I asked Craig, do you know of a painter named Ed Mell? And I said, I know you've been in a dentist's office or a lawyer's office in Arizona, and you've seen a lithograph of Ed Mell's. And from that moment, Craig just welcomed me to document the process of how you make an opera, which I was very fascinated by it because it encompasses all of the arts. I myself was not an opera fan. I was more in the world of theater and musical theater, but I think Craig's style and Stephen Mark Cohen's style really makes this opera accessible. So that's how this project started for me. I'm gonna ask Craig to talk a little bit about what inspired him about the novel and how he saw in Zane Grey's work something that could be translated to a new medium.
The opera itself was born of a meeting a project and to work on. And so I was in Branson, Missouri with my show, The Three Redneck Tenors, and I came up, I ended up reading Riders of the Purple Sage, and I thought, wow, this is an extraordinarily dramatic and melodramatic and very scopy work, like big scope. And I thought, well, the opera seems to have that going for it, and so perhaps I should try my hand at doing this. So I set about to do a treatment. My the real reason I did it is I found extremely contemporary issues inside the novel, and that was the issue of guns, Lasseter's take on them, Jane's take on them, violence, women's rights, the land, the usurping of land, religious extremism. I thought all of those things were extremely germane to our contemporary world, which is why I think Riders has probably stood the test of time already. And so I found that to be a very current thing. And then I was an Arizonan, and here it was in Arizona. And so it seemed the right thing to do. So I just started writing it. Actually, I wrote it. I don't know, I'm maybe the only one who does it. I wrote an opera for fun because I didn't know anyone in the opera world. I used to have worked in that world before, but it had been a very long time. And so I didn't know who was going to produce it, or if it would ever get produced, or if it would be a labor of love. But here we were. And so Arizona Opera heard about it and got on board, and well, you guys know the rest.
So Craig started the opera and did a workshop, and then it took several years for the opera to be mounted. And during that time, that's when we came up to Mormon Lake Lodge and met the members of Zane Grey West Society. And one of the things I wanted to do with the film was look at the way the landscape influenced all these different artists. You know, Craig turned the landscape into music, Ed Mell turns the landscape into fine art, and Zane Grey turned the landscape into words and story. And so to really understand Zane Grey's artistic process, Ed Meyer helped us get set up with some friends in Moccasin, and Harvey Leak met us out at Batatakin, and we were able to visit the places that had actually inspired Zane Grey. And this is the passion you all have for Zane Grey intrigued me. The moment I stood in the places that he stood and understand how he would weave the emotion and the sweep of these places into stories, I found a whole new depth and appreciation for him. And it was very exciting to go to Pipe Spring National Monument, you know, the model for Witherstein Ranch, and Batatakin, his model for Surprise Valley, and hope to get back to the Grand Canyon one day and see the Surprise Valley that was his initial brainchild for the place. But it was very, very lovely to be in these places and to understand his artistic process. So I would love to open up to questions, and all you need to do is hit your mic and ask a question, and you know, get your reaction to the film. And if I know most of you are literature and history buffs, I would love to know how the film played for you if you were new to opera or the performing arts.
I guess I can start off a little bit here. What amazed me, you know, when we talk about the artistry, we have the artistry of Zane Grey with writing. We've got the music that came with it. And then also, to me, the scenery and just how all that came about was just absolutely amazing. I guess Ed, I can't remember what his last name is now, but just the artistry, how it all fit together, and how everybody collaborated to do that. I just thought it was really neat. So not really a question, but just an observation.
Well, thank you. I'm glad it felt like they all belonged together, because I know that everyone worked very hard. Would you say that that synthesis was part of something that you were very aware of, Craig, in the process of making the opera?
Well, you know, it was interesting, especially, I mean, the reason the prelude sounds like it does, and we hear that in the film quite a bit. The reason the prelude sounds like what it does is because Ed had made a visual suggestion to me about how this might look at the very beginning. And so that afternoon, I literally went home with that in my head and wrote the prelude. Now, the director didn't direct it like that, but the inspiration of having Ed sort of do that set how the very first note you hear of it. So this synthesis of scenery, lyric, Zane Grey's words, which Steve, you know, borrowed heavily. I mean, they're peppered throughout the book. Was you know, certainly foremost in my mind.
One quick comment before we go any further. I have the ability to mute everybody. So I did that, even if you didn't think you had done it. I did it for everybody other than Kristin and Craig. So to unmute yourself, you'll have to go down to the lower left-hand corner and click on the microphone, or tell me and I'll unclick it for you. So.
This is Ed. Can you hear me okay? Sure.
Yeah, Ed. Hi.
one thing that impressed me is that Millie Ernst Gray, although it was powerful in the book, was even more powerful in the opera. And I think that was one of your favorite scenes as well, wasn't it, Craig?
That is actually my favorite scene in the opera. In the book, it literally is 2 lines long.
Yeah.
He stood there sort of unflappable, looking into the sunset at Billy Ernst's grave. And Steve called me and he goes, I think there's an entire scene in here. And I said, yeah, I think there is too. And, obviously we had to, consolidate characters. We had to move characters around. We had to move scenes around and stuff like that. And then, we literally contrived the bishop. There's a scene in the opera, for those of you who have not seen it, where the bishop and Tull get together and talk about why they have tried to exert power the way they have. And we thought, if we tell just a good guy, bad guy story, that doesn't allow our piece to expand in the way that if we tell, everybody seems well-intentioned, even Tull. And the Mormons are particularly well-intentioned to try to keep their society alive and try to keep their world intact, given that they were martyred in their own country. So we wanted to have a scene where the bishop and Tull, who in reading the book, you might find them to be a bit evil, were actually, well-intentioned. So.
Well, and Stephen Mark Cohen, in the duet that you two wrote for the bishop and Tull, called She Must Be Led, or They Must Be Led, he took a lot of that language out of a Brigham Young speech.
Yes, most of it. Yeah.
He's tried to stay very true to all the origin text that he worked with. And that's something we wanted to convey. We had a great shoot up on the Navajo Nation where we took the book out and shot the book on location, the original copy of the book, where you could really see the typeset in the pages. And my editors had to pull me back from putting that everywhere in the film because I'm as a writer, I love to see text and think about how it comes to life off the page.
Peter Coyote's, obviously his narration was wonderful. How did he respond to the literature in the opera?
He liked it. He's, Peter Coyote's just kind of probably like you expect him to be. He's a pretty cool cat. It's not his first rodeo, as he would say. And when you record with him, he doesn't usually make a lot of comments on the script. But he really loved reading Zane Grey's novel. It really gave him, he talked about how exciting it was to narrate another novel that he did, and he really got into playing all the different characters. And I think it was fun for him to really have that kind of acting, probably not a challenge for him, but he had a lot of fun with it. And on a funny side note, the audio engineer in Sebastopol, California, where he goes in and records, used to be the recording engineer for the new writers of The Purple Sage. So there was a lot of discussion around that. They thought this project was cool just because of, the relationship with the new writers of The Purple Sage, which I'm sure you've all had to explain at different times, has nothing to do with Zane Grey. But he said, I can't remember the name of the lead singer. He thought that he was probably the most literary one of the bunch and is the one who came up with the title for the band. Did that answer your question, Ed?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
So what do you do with all the scenery afterwards? Do you store that forever or what?
I'm not really sure what they did with it. I think they have a giant warehouse, and but one of the things that is cool, and I think most of it premiered in 2017, but it was the last piece Arizona Opera did before they closed their doors for COVID. So we closed on March 8th. And
they did it again in 2020.
They did it in 2020. Yeah. And usually, like your famous operas like La Boheme or Carmen or La Traviata, they're rotated every 8 to 10 years because they're big money makers. And Arizona Opera was so excited about this piece. They did it 3 years later. So that was pretty remarkable thing. So they had to save the set at least for 3 years. And because Ed had his hand in that set, I suspect they're going to keep it for a long time because it may actually have some value one day.
Well, they store it so that when other opera companies mount the opera, they can rent it to other companies if those companies want to do it in the same style.
They wanted that
Arizona
production of it, yeah.
did it. Mhm. So it's sitting in a warehouse in Phoenix, just waiting for its next appearance.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to know when it's shown again somewhere.
Yeah, we'll
Evan?
definitely let everyone know the next opera company that picks it up. I think live theater is going to be shut down for most of 2021.
Yeah.
But luckily we have, things like this film to remind us why we all gather together to witness something like this.
Have any other opera companies expressed an interest in it?
I had quite a few ask me about it. It's an extremely expensive piece to produce because, the orchestra is 55 players. The singers are, there's 6 major roles. Well, you guys read the book, so that 6 major roles. And I had right before COVID shut, I had 3 opera companies looking very seriously at it, but then the door shut. And I suspect when they come back, it's going to be hard to predict what happens. I suspect they're going to have to do some of the standards to get back on financial footing. But I have some connections in Germany I'm working with right now, so we'll see when they open up because the Germans really appreciate Zane Grey and they all know who he is. So I'm thinking it being its grand opera style that maybe it'll have a life in Europe.
Right, the Germans and the Italians love the image of the Old West.
They sure do. Spaghetti Western. This is a spaghetti Western opera.
Well, and I'll probably get the name wrong, but is it Kurt May or Karl May? That's the Zane Grey of Germany.
Oh, yeah, I've heard his name, yes.
Yeah, he's very, very popular over there. They still have festivals over there.
Yeah, I think there's a whole theater built to him. Might be Carl. Yeah. Any other questions about the film or the opera or anything that surprised you or?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
When Riders was published, there was some concern because of the the way the Mormons were portrayed. Have you had any kickback from the Mormons?
Sadly, no. I was looking for, there's nothing that sells tickets better than a kind of picket line outside of a theater. But I was very
He's
careful.
joking.
Ed was very gracious to kind of guide me through. We had many emails and conversations about doing this. I wasn't looking to offend anybody actually, and the more I became more I studied the Mormons and went to Salt Lake City and kind of got into it a bit, the more I had an appreciation for them. And as I said, I really wasn't interested in telling a good guy, bad guy tale because I think they were doing the best they could under the circumstances. And to portray that in the opera was the best way to do it. So I don't think anyone was hurt. I have several Mormon friends in the theater. The very first people I ever showed the project to, even before Christy, was a Mormon couple who were allies and friends of mine in San Jose, California. And I had them read it and I had them read the treatment. I said, go for it. If you think this is offensive or if you think anything's gonna be a problem. And then Stefan Gordon, who played our first Tull in one of the presentations at Arizona Opera in one of the workshops, his father's a bishop in the Mormon church, and I invited his dad to come see it and then talk to him afterwards. And there's a scene, you remember the scene where Lassiter's horse gets, or he talks about how his horse is blinded?
Right.
His father said, we already get it without having to add the cruelty to an animal. into this. And he goes, and that tilted it for him into a bad direction. So we took it out. He says,
Good.
we already get the agendas are complex. He says, the minute they blind the horse, he goes, yeah, now all they are is just cruel people. And so we took it out.
It was very well received.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, and we, those of us who live in Arizona and other arid climates in the West, we all owe a debt of gratitude to the Mormons who figured out how to irrigate and use water wisely here. And, Mormons are a big part of our community down here. And we really wanted to make the point that, this is fiction, and two, that they're playing bad guys. They're not bad guys.
And in our opera, they're well-intentioned, I think. So maybe not so much Tull, but the bishop for sure. So.
Certainly.
I had a kind of an observation, a couple of them that I thought were interesting in a correlation between the way Gray worked and the way you worked putting the opera together. And he struggled a little bit if he didn't go visit the location and really get the feel of the location. And I think, Kristin, you talked about that at the beginning of this, that, going to those places, standing where he stood was so important. And I think that was true for him. He had to go stand where those people that he was writing about had stood before too. And I think that was great. All the background research you guys did in going to those places, taking that extra time, I think it made it that much more real for people and tied the two together better. And also, you mentioned going to Mormon Lake, and I know some of the interviews that the people saw in the documentary from people in the society, a lot of those were actually done even before that at the actual site of the Zane Grey cabin under the Tonto Rim up above Payson. There were several of the interviews that were done there. So there was a lot of different stops along the way, before the final product that really had tons of research behind it. A technical question that I have for you is the landscape shots in the documentary from above look like they were done with a drone. And yeah. I was curious about that. Was that true? And it was just made the expanse of what you were shooting, it really did a great job and did it justice, I thought.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed them. Our director of photography, Bill Davis, many of you have probably met him. He became a licensed drone pilot during the course of this project. And one of the things that's interesting about looking at the landscape from that vantage point is Ed Mell developed his style of painting from flying around in a helicopter with Jerry Foster. And so early on, when he started doing his landscapes, he realized that he was seeing them from the air in a way that no one ever saw them. So we felt, one, that was a really important tie-in just in terms of Ed's art, but also it's such a cinematic experience. Every time you watch a Western, look for the jib shot. It's you're coming into town and the camera comes up and you see the town and then it goes out. And there's certain conventions in Westerns that I really wanted to pay homage to. And part of it, especially as a documentary filmmaker, getting to use this rich orchestrated score that is the hallmark of the big Hollywood Western. These things all came together, and that's what we actually have 2 licenses for the music, just so that I could run the music under those scenic shots and stay connected to the process of the opera and the forward momentum of the film while we were out in the field. But for me, I'm as much a river runner and a wilderness advocate as I am, I grew up in the theater and performing arts and all of that. And so it was really, really, really important to me to have the landscape present as a muse and as a character. And as we've said with the opera, the 5th main character in the opera, You know, the setting is a huge factor in that shaped these characters, and that Candace Cant talks about, you know, Zane Grey's characters being shaped by the landscape. As a Westerner, I feel that very much. So yes, they were drone shots and we had a blast out on location getting them.
They were great.
I was wondering if the whole production was ever filmed or it would be available besides going to the theater, because I doubt if I'll ever get to Phoenix.
Well, there are two things that we're hoping for right now. One is other opera companies to pick it up. And two, we did film the entire opera, but that's kind of in the hands of Arizona Opera right now. And the music, the orchestra has a very, very powerful union which protects them and their rights. And there are lots of fees involved in getting it released. So it is sitting somewhere. We don't know what the future will hold, but Zane Grey West Society is always first on our list to let you know what's going on with the opera and the film. So
it is being published now by E.C. Shermer Publishing. And they're sort of the leading new publisher of operas in this country. And on that website, let me see if I can find it. Terry, if I send that to you, will you be able to get it to everybody? On the website of the publication, apparently, are a couple of snippets, and I think the entire graveyard scene. If you wanted to look at that with the orchestra and with the cast and with the set and everything like that, it's pretty yummy to look at, I have to say. And anyway, let me find that, Terry, and I will send it to you, and you can disperse it. At least
distribute it from here.
You can see like maybe 10 minutes of it on their website.
But it's interesting because we had a lot of people who were not opera fans who, came from the Western angle or from Ed Mel, the fine arts angle, and really got pulled into the story because of the accessibility of it and the familiarity of the characters and the struggles. And I'd say more often than not, people walked out of the opera elated and just kind of moved by how grand it was. I mean, Todd or Terry or Harvey could talk about, or Ed could talk about seeing the opera live, but that's really what I wanted for the film too, is I wanted people to feel uplifted and moved by achieving that pinnacle of getting the opera up on its feet.
No, I've never really seen an opera live, but it was really, I got just watching the clips and all that. I'm familiar with the story, so I really connected right away. I wasn't even thinking of it's an opera. It's a story.
Right. Well, we like to call it the gateway drug opera. You don't even know you're watching opera. It's so entertaining. But I think you all understand the importance of story and stories about who we are. And that's what was significant about this piece for me, is every major region around the world has their contribution to opera. Every major city, Florence and Paris and Berlin. And this work is significant because this is our story. This is the story of the settling of the West, and it has themes and motifs that we still struggle with today in terms of sovereignty and vigilante justice, and it's significant because it's meaningful to us, and it's rendered by some of our finest American artists. And I am just blown away by this kind of collaboration across the centuries between Zane Grey and Craig and Stephen Mark Cohen, the librettist, and Ed Mel. I mean, we're really seeing our master craftsmen at work on something that's going to speak for us for hundreds of years.
Christy, tell them, so the film itself is about 1 hour and 25 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them how how long it could have been.
Oh, stop. Well, we shot a lot. We shot for 5 years. And when things weren't happening with the opera and I was dreaming of Zane Grey and dreaming about how I wanted to make a movie about Zane Grey's influence on the Hollywood Western, I would go out and find something to shoot. And this is something we'll probably want to discuss at some point. I have some beautiful footage that really shows a lot of the Zane Grey West Society members talking about things that they're passionate about. So, you know, as a historian, I have this, it must be a hunter-gatherer urge because I just want to squirrel it all away. As a filmmaker, I've learned you can't spend your whole budget in the shoot and then expect to finish things. So we have a lot of footage and it's very flexible and we can make other things of it. And as we let the film go out to the world, right now it's at film festivals around the world, I'll be putting out more and more social media. We have a Facebook page, which I think is called Writers Opera or Writers Opera Film. And then we're on Instagram at Writers Opera Film, and really welcome you to follow us and chime in and, you know, keep Zane Grey alive by showing your passion for him and his work.
Christy, do these people know where some of these film festivals have been? Can you just rattle off a few?
Well, let's see. We were.
Let me interrupt 1 second, Kristin.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of new people join in. I just want to recognize.
It looks like we might have Robert Zane Grey.
It looks like might have Robert. I've got him muted right now. Let me unmute him, ask him to unmute. And Henry Nardi's here, and there's Al. I'm not sure who Al is.
Oh, it sounds like the Zane Grey house.
Hi, I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me.
Hi there.
We can.
We've got Clark Ream and Henry Nardi.
I have a question for Robert. You might tell us about who all you brought over to see the opera the first time around and how they responded to it.
Hey, can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Robert.
sorry. I'm at work at the moment, so I have to be discreet about the hand. So it's 9 o'clock in the morning.
For those of you that don't know, Robert actually lives in Japan, so he's connecting with us from Japan.
Okay, so basically, I'm one of 6 kids. My entire family went to see the opera in Phoenix, and I think it was the first night that opera was performed in Phoenix.
What's going
on?
I just got it.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So anyway, the entire family, including my wife and my 4 kids, we all went together. We all flew from Tokyo to LA and then Phoenix. And we and basically all my siblings, my mother, my stepfather, we all went to the performance together. And it was awesome. I mean, it was such an incredible experience for everybody to see and to I mean, basically, this is so much fun. Like to see Zane Grey's story put on stage the way it was, and kind of a feeling of, it was a very, very nice experience, and we really had a blast watching it and hearing the music.
How many people of your family actually came, of the extended family? Do you recall?
I think it was, my goodness, not just my kids, but all my siblings' children also were attending. So, except for the youngest one, which was who was a baby at the time. So it was at least 20.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you for for helping us out with that. I got in touch with Craig after finding out about this, and I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to get tickets, but Craig made sure that that happened. It was such a very kind gesture, and we're very thankful for that.
My pleasure.
So I was going to tell you a little bit about where the film has been seen and where we are coming up. So far, our hot spots are Australia. There seems to be a lot of, we won the best documentary film at the Salt Cedar Festival in Australia. We won Best Director at the Moscow Film Festival, which was very exciting. In the next few weeks, it's going to be seen in Ojai, California and Coronado Island. Catalina Island passed on it, and I was really blown away. I just thought, you know, come on, you have to embrace your Zane Grey heritage, but they didn't bite on it. It's been a very odd festival season, as you can imagine, with COVID and a lot of festivals going online. We're going to be in Fort Wayne, Indiana, at the Sydney Women's Film Festival in Sydney, Australia, and then 2 locations in Texas, Real East in Kilgore, Texas, and the Lone Star Festival in Fort Worth. And then fingers crossed, we have application or submissions out to festivals throughout the winter, like Cleveland, and I wrote the Cleveland Festival and let them know that Zane Grey and the librettist Stephen Mark Cohen both had Ohio connections. You always have to write a little letter and tell the festival why it would be a good fit for their festival. So there will be more festivals coming up through the next few months, and then at some point in the spring, we'll go to a nationwide streaming of the film on Amazon or Apple TV or Netflix or something of that sort, and we'll let you all know when that happens. And Robert, we also have some applications out for festivals in Japan, and I'm really hoping to get the opera in front of some Japanese opera companies. I think it would be wonderful to see the opera mounted in Japan.
I'd love to help you out with that if I can.
Okay, great. It's a deal.
How about the
Kristin, when
I
is
Sundance?
look forward to seeing it
the
over here.
Sundance? Well, 2 things. One is our timing was off for Sundance. Sundance only takes premieres, and we would have had to have sat on the film for almost an entire year to even submit to Sundance. Also, what I'm finding with the top tier festivals is that you often have to have a sales agent or somebody who puts you into the mix at a very high level in a professional way. So we're a little more of a grassroots operation, but we are grateful for every screening that we get and the opportunity to reach out to new audiences.
How does
Kristin, when is
how does a film recover the expenses, or how do you generate revenue?
I don't know if there's ever a documentary that's covered its expenses and revenue. This project was set up as a nonprofit. So people who donated to it got a tax deductible donation, which was lovely. And we had a lot of people in the community here in Phoenix who really embraced the opera and the film as part of Arizona's cultural heritage and something that they really wanted to get seen. It just incredible good fortune to be supported in that way. We certainly do, we have a lot of unpaid for expenses that we would love to see recouped in distribution when it's streaming. Every time it streams and someone watches it, you get a little slice of something. But if I dedicated my life to documentary filmmaking to make a lot of money, I would have chosen unwisely. I do it because I'm a storyteller and because I value history and the way art enlivens the human experience. So we've been really fortunate. You know, every film project needs more funding, but we've gotten this far. So, you know, just got to keep the good mojo going.
Hey, Terry, I just forwarded you that link to the publishers. And so you guys can see Ventress Aria, which was the big popular aria, and the Graveyard Scene.
Very good. I'll distribute that, pass
Yeah,
it
so
around.
distribute that amongst
Also-
everybody. You guys can see.
Okay. Also, let me just say there's a few new people that have joined, and I have muted you guys. So if you tried to ask something, that's why and you didn't get a response, you're muted right now. So if you want to ask a question, go ahead and go ahead and unmute and do that. It looks like Henry wants to ask a question.
No, well, I just wanted to mention in 2001, Lauren Gray came to Milford, Pennsylvania for the Black Bear Film Festival. And at that film festival, we showed the 1925 silent film, The Vanishing American. And Lauren then visited his old home and everything. We have all that on video. In any event, the Black Bear Film Festival is having their film festival probably this month. It's probably too late, but it's called the Black Bear Film Festival, Milford, Pennsylvania. You might want to check into that. I'm sure they would want to do it if they knew about it.
Fantastic. I will look that up. And it's my recollection that The Vanishing American was shot in Monument Valley before John Ford ever discovered Monument Valley. Is that true?
Well, yeah, well, the opening scene of the 1925 silent film starts out with Monument Valley. And Zane Grey did insist that at that time, he was insisting that everything be done on location. And I can send you that, but Paramount Pictures came out with a very long promotional brochure in 1925 about how the film was filmed on location, mainly in the Tuba City area. And a lot of the action takes place at what now is the Tuba City Trading Post, the Babbitt Trading Post. They created a separate one outside of town so they could burn it down. But in any event, it was one of the first films where Hollywood took all their people and carpenters and tons of people out to Arizona to do that. And I will try to remember to send you that Paramount brochure. I think if Harvey Leak is on the line somewhere, he introduced me to the boy who was in that film, who is the son of the boy who was in the Navajo boy who was in the film. And Harvey can tell you about that. He probably still knows his name is Mannheim, which is kind of an interesting story because he was in the film, he was called Son of Manhammer. And then Paramount Picture took a lot of Navajos around the world to promote the film. And eventually that boy's name turned into Mannheim because he went to Germany.
Yeah, I want to just mention that some of the footage for that 1925 Vanishing American film was in Sega Canyon, not too far downstream from where Batata Canyon comes in. And we found the exact site. It's a cliff dweller scene at the start of the movie. And the background scenery matches that all exactly. And as Henry was mentioning, it's Mannheimer.
Right.
Not Henry, which
Mannheimer.
Mannhammer. Leo is a good friend of mine, Navajo guide, and he said his father was probably called Mannhammer because he was a silversmith and hammered.
Oh, cool.
And then his uncle got educated and traveled around the world and probably found the name Mannheimer somewhere and started spelling it that way.
Well,
I'd like
an
to
interest-
acknowledge we've got a
interesting
few other
thing.
people on here. Let me acknowledge there's a few other people that have joined us. Clark Green, Keith Long. I'm seeing Jim Gray and Al as being present, but I'm not seeing any video for them. So I'm hoping they were there. But again, most of these people everybody is muted. Unmute yourself if you want to talk or ask a question.
Can I say something as a new member?
Go ahead, Keith. Good to meet you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be invited to listen in and be a fly on the wall. Henry Nardi is a member of the James Museum Book Club, and he interested me in your avocation with Zane Grey and the Indians in the West, and so that kind of captivated me, and that's the reason I'm here. I was kind of captured as a prisoner.
Very good.
Well, one thing I might mention, Terry, and it's an aside, but the members may want to be aware that we contribute both to Kayenta and Tuba City in terms of some support with the coronavirus as a society.
The Navajo Nation was hit especially hard with the coronavirus.
What other questions for Craig and Kristin?
Just one briefly, Kristin, you might do a little commercial. You've done some other historic documentaries, at least one since you did this. You might want to update us on what you did there and what your future plans are.
And what you won.
Well, we just got the news that we won a regional Emmy Award for Best Historical Documentary for a piece that we did on Castle Hot Springs. And Castle Hot Springs is Arizona's first resort, and it really is indicative of kind of the foresight that grew Arizona into statehood around the turn of the century. And it's just it's a very rich history. My mother was a very underfunded owner of the resort in the 1980s after it burned down. And so it has significance to my family, and it lay fallow for over 40 years and has just been renovated and revived. And one of the things that I've been able to do in the process of finding people to interview about Castle Hot Springs and preserving those interviews is I've been able to reconnect the Yavapai tribe with their ancestral grounds and invite them out there and have them spend time at the spring. And we did a saguaro fruit harvest this summer, which was really neat. So that finishing Castle Hot Springs and Riders of the Purple Sage at the same time made for an eventful year. And right now I'm focusing on getting them both into distribution. The Castle Hot Springs film will be on Amazon and Apple TV by Thanksgiving. And we have a lot of proposals out. You know, we had a lot of films that were like just ready to go before coronavirus hit, something about water in Arizona. We also have a proposal out about Liberty Wildlife, a rehabilitation center here that has a non-eagle feather repository, and they provide feathers to Native Americans across the country for ceremonial use. So we have lots of things just kind of simmering with what's going on with the economy and coronavirus. But one of my dream projects in the future is, well, I have two dream projects. One is to do something with Harvey about his great-grandparents. And the other would be, I would love to, and this would be a very expensive film. I really, really like to make expensive films. I would love to take a look at Zane Grey's influence on the Hollywood Western and the way in which he not only informed the stories that are so meaningful to us, but that whole visual language of the Western that became so popular in the 20th century. And we'd need lots of film clips and lots of big music like Craig's music to do something like that. So, but I thank you all for making time to do this and for watching the film this weekend. And To say that this film would have been diminished without the involvement of Zane Grey's West Society is a huge understatement.
Absolutely.
The support, the research, the knowledge, the passion, the way you ask a question and get like 3 pages of information back. I love it. I love it all. And I feel like I've been very fortunate to not only get the information that I needed to do this honorably, but also I feel like I've made a lot of friends in the process and with a lot of smart people. And Terry, you've been there every step of the way, and you're very instrumental in helping us get the opera up. Ed, Roseanne, Harvey, Cheryl sending out all the communications, Robert coming all the way out from Japan and interviewing with us, Todd showing up in his cowboy hat on opening night. It's just wonderful to be part of your community, and it does my heart good to know that if I got any part of Zane Grey's story right.
Well, and we consider the 2 of you to be part of our family. So keep that in mind as you move forward.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Wonderful to see you all.
At this point, we're going to go ahead and close this. Everybody should have an email from me today indicating the activities tomorrow. I want to encourage you to watch Alan Pratt's presentation. That is a wonderful presentation. And other than that, you guys be careful. Don't forget to bid on our auction that's up and online right now. And in the meantime, be safe, be careful. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, Kristin.
Thank you. Have a
Craig.
wonderful conference. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.